all of you. I have to keep this away from my mouth. And thank you also for our internet audience, which is presumably working well, and for your participation here. And you can't participate from afar, but you can watch. Now, okay, what is the Los Alamos Study Group? That's a question that some of you may have. We are a kind of activist think tank, formerly in Santa Fe, now located in Albuquerque. And we have been working on nuclear weapons and related issues since 1989, full-time since 1992. I am a former engineer, environmental regulator, school teacher, and with a regional planning education as well. I want to thank also Trish, who's walking in, and Bex, who are the other parts of the study group staff. And that's us. But we have a long history here in Los Alamos, running back to our first meetings in Fuller Lodge, where we talked about what the shape of the lab might be after the Cold War, the dialectic between openness and secrecy. These were some of our early discussions here. And we had the privilege in those old days of working with various luminaries of the past here, Carson Mark, who had been head of the theoretical division, Hans Bethe, Ted Taylor, whom I spent a fair bit of time with in Geneva in international negotiations, Joseph Rotblatt, who, as you may know, left Los Alamos during the Manhattan Project, and we organized a talk for him here after he received the Nobel-Peace-Prize. So that's us. We've been active internationally, nationally quite a bit, and here in the state. We used to work more on environmental issues since that was partly my background, and Trish did this in Texas near the Pantex nuclear weapons plant for many years as well. Of all the stuff that we have here, I encourage you to take a mug. We have, they're almost retro classics at this point, and we have quite a few still, and they're useful. Another thing I wanted to say in your first part of this first 5 minutes is that we want to be reality-based. We want to be realists. And so we are not interested in being the purest. We're not interested in signaling our virtue particularly. We want to be realistic, or at least we aspire to be that. And at that, I think that's all I need to say about that right now. And right at the beginning, I want to pause just for a second and for us to realize and acknowledge that we are engaged in a couple of wars through proxies. We have a proxy war running in Ukraine, which is very dangerous and very, very intense and bloody. And there is a genocide underway in Palestine that we are supporting in politically and financially and militarily, which threatens to spin out into a nuclear war as if the destruction of hundreds of thousands of people and cold-blooded murder was not enough. So we're in a very peculiar time. This is not like the beginning of the study group where we were talking about what to do with the peace dividend and what the shape of the lab would be in a time of peace, we are constantly hearing the din of war drums in our ears right now. I often go to Washington. We're going there again soon. And there is a kind of war hysteria there, which makes rational, reality-based conversations difficult. So I'm going to talk about pit production because we're approaching a choice about pit production. Where will it be? How big will it be? When will it be? How will we make the cores of nuclear weapons? And so that's where I want to start. Let's see if this works. Oh, got to turn it on. Yeah. So this is more or less an outline of the evening. I'll be speaking in 3 parts. Bex will be speaking in part of the third there. And we'll have a lot of time for questions and answers and comments. So we'll be concise and try, if at all possible, to keep your questions and comments until those periods of time so we can get through everything. Now, why is this important? You all know, you know what a plutonium pit is, or a warhead core. This is the fissile heart or core of the first stage of a nuclear weapon. Yeah, no, Trish is going to get a little model here. Yeah, that's okay. So, maybe it's about yay big, and so yeah, this garden ornament, perhaps about this big, not necessarily spherical. And when we talk about a pit, we are talking about the fissile core of the first stage of a modern thermonuclear weapon. In the case of the Hiroshima bomb, there was only one stage to that bomb. And so there was a pit and an explosive. So it was just what we call the primary stage of a modern nuclear explosive. So these pits are generally made of plutonium because it's a better material for the purpose. And they're hard to make, and the United States has not had a place to make them, with minor exceptions, since 1989, when the Rocky Flats plant near Denver was shut down. So acquiring the capability to make these pits is very expensive. And at Los Alamos, the program will cost about $22 billion through 2032. About $9 billion has already been spent, 9.3, I think. And it's also about the same size program through 2032 at the Savannah River site. I'm sorry about the acronyms. I was in a rush, but you guys are tough, and you just yell out. That's something you should interrupt about. SRS means Savannah Riverside in South Carolina. Through 2039, we think that this will cost $63 billion to make these pits. It is the largest program in the warhead business since the early 1950s. It currently comprises about 1/3 of Los Alamos's total financial effort, and at that scale, because of what it is and how big it is, it changes what LANL is. Whether and how much and when pits are made affect the nature and direction of U.S. nuclear weapons altogether, arms control, and U.S. foreign policy. Without new pits, it's not possible to make brand new nuclear weapons. It would not affect the presence or absence with. Yes, I was speaking a little tautologically. It wouldn't be a brand new nuclear weapon then. It would be a weapon with an old pit in it. They do age slowly. But yes, you could, but they're not necessarily interchangeable, and the warheads are tailored to specific applications. So it's tricky. whether or not we have pits right away won't affect deployments immediately, but it could begin to do so in about a decade from now. There are choices. LANL pit production is oriented toward a new weapon called the warhead called the W87-1 warhead, which is for the Sentinel missile. And there are already enough warheads to put on the Sentinel missile, to put one on each missile, but with the W87-1s, you could have more than one. Pit production around here at that scale of 22 billion affects everything. It has widespread impacts. It has impacts already. And finally, which is really partly why we're here, the whole program is kind of metastable, and it's temporary. It's whatever is decided now is going to change. And it's temporary, we think, even if it is decided to grow pit production further beyond the program of record at Los Alamos. Okay, quickly, the history of this at Los Alamos. Los Alamos started making pits during Manhattan Project, but immediately Norris Bradbury and his deputies after the war said, no, we don't want to do this. And we don't want to be in making bombs. We don't want to be making pits. So Los Alamos was able to unload this mission. And then for a great long time, LANL did pit R&D, making a few pits for test explosions. And then in a approximately 5-year period, LANL made 30 pits, of which 21 went to the stockpile, and a maximum of 11 in 1 year. And it was never meant to be an enduring production mission, but just a demonstration. After that, there was a screw-up at PF4, some major screw-ups, in fact, a series of them, and it was shut down for all high-mass operations for more than 3 years. And from then until now, till a few days ago, Los Alamos had never made a war reserve that is a high-quality pit. And still, there are safety problems which are being grandfathered in. Okay, this is just a breakdown of when Los Alamos made what. And and then we have a few pictures, I think, of what that looked. Oh, yeah, here's the later production from 07 to 12 for reference. These slides are going to be on our website, so you don't have to absorb them all, but that's it. That was the little burst of war reserve pit manufacturing that took place at LANL between 07 and 2012. There, that building at Sandia was for weapons assembly without the pits. That's not pits, that was for assembling weapons. They were removable pit weapons at that time. Here was the plutonium building at Los Alamos during the Manhattan Project. They were terribly afraid it was going to burn down, have a fire like the uranium building did. And so they built this one, and over here at on DP Road. So DP stands, as you know, for Delta Prime, D Building Prime. And there's another view of it back in the day. And here's what it looked like in 1999. Here is LANL's map of the contamination of that mesa underneath the plutonium processing and all the rest. They just said, "Oh, damn, it's all contaminated." So then we come to the end of the Cold War, and then the drumbeat began that Los Alamos could make all the pits for the country. And interestingly, many of you will see, does that work? Yeah. Natural Resources Defense Council was the one who said, yes, Los Alamos could make 300 pits per year, enough for the entire stockpile. So we have a theme that has developed since then. There was a plan in 1988 by Sig Hecker and others to build a large plutonium facility at TA-55, and it looked like that. And it was stopped by wide opposition in northern New Mexico. The last thing people wanted here was another Rocky Flats. And it was, the project manager's name was Bill Christensen. And when Bill said, yes, this building will be built with a hotel concept, so we'll be able to change the purpose later if needed, then everybody started yelling and said, this is exactly what we're telling you. You're telling us this is a laboratory for testing and R&D, and we're telling you it could be a factory later. Anyway, that Senator Bingaman helped kill that. Then there were, it's easier to read it for me to read it here. Then there was a project called the CMR upgrades. So the CMR is a large building, which you can see in the next slide in the foreground. I think it might be the largest building at LANL, maybe. And this was to be take the place of the SNML and be the auxiliary plutonium facility that would enable pit production. But it's very old, it's very badly built, and it sits on top of an earthquake fault. So efforts to strengthen and upgrade that building came to an end with the end of the last century. Then there was another plan called the Chemistry and Metallurgy Research Replacement Nuclear Facility, and another building called CMRR, Radiological Laboratory Utility and Office Building. That was the next plan. And the Department of Energy told the military that LANL could be producing between 50 and 80 pits per year in 2022 by using PF4 and these two facilities. However, in 2012, the nuclear facility was indefinitely deferred. Some of these gray hairs are from that. Jody helped us, I can see her there. And it turned out to be infeasible for various reasons, especially geologic and geotechnical. And so then what to do? Well, meanwhile, NNSA had put forward a proposal for an even larger pit manufacturing facility centered around PF4. That's the existing PF4. This was going to be where the CMR nuclear facility was going to be. This is now the CMR RLU, but it's been renamed PF 400. And then there was going to be another pair of buildings over here to double the square footage of those. That was really ambitious, really fanciful. To build the CMR nuclear facility was going to have a footprint that extended over much of the laboratory and displace a lot of activity and a lot of traffic. Everything you see there in yellow was devoted to that one little thing right there. They were going to have to basically take over all that area, and then they were going to have to dig a foundation that went all the way down to the bottom of the canyon there because the soil was unstable. So that didn't happen. Now the next idea was that there would be underground modules that would be underground workplaces that would be connected by a tunnel to PF4. And the advantage of this would be that they would not have to be built to the same safety standards because the public would not be exposed in the event of an accident. And they got as far as this CD0, which is concept, purpose and need, I guess. But this too died, has vanished now without a trace. Oops. Here is what the modules are supposed to look like on the surface. The working part of that is all below the surface. And let's see. That's the corner of, no, I guess this is the corner of PF4 over here. And the tunnel goes here like that underneath. So I want to, let's see, I think, yeah, conclude this part by saying that while, but emphasize that LANL has always made some pits for testing. And there was a burst of building pits for the stockpile. It was very difficult for LANL. But now Los Alamos is in a new era where they are to be building, they are to have a reliable, AKA high confidence, that's a quote, or industrial pit operation. And that's what costs $22 billion. This is, it's not like having some people at a bench making a pit or two, a glove box, excuse me, but it's not bench scale work. It's in order to be able to sequence the production activity across the United States, a reliable pit production operation is needed. And that is an entirely different culture. It's a different industrial level commitment. And it is resulting in Los Alamos having hired thousands of people and operating 24/7 for now until the foreseeable future at PF4. And the centerpiece of this is this capital project, Los Alamos Plutonium Pit Production Project. Current price tag is $5 billion, but it will increase at the next critical decision level. We can be sure. And I think that's it. We're 3 minutes over, but so questions and comments from everybody. Oh yeah, sure. But we got to be really speedy. Yes. Yeah.
What percent of the laboratory work will this entail?
About 1/3. It's yes. That's what it is right now. It'll be a little more later. Say 35%, roughly.
Perhaps I came to the wrong talk, but I was curious, can you talk about some of the technical aspects of how you build a pit and how that works, and why does this cost $22 billion to make a small metal sphere?
Yeah. I can not talk too much about that, having seeing how that's all classified, but consider it a kind of matryoshka doll. There's the plutonium portion is the innermost spherical or ellipsoidal body. Outside that, there are shells. There is a hole that lawn ornament has a hole too. A tube to convey a deuterium tritium mixture is welded into it there, and that goes to the tritium reservoir. And there is an explosive valve which introduces that gas, a boost gas, into the central cavity. The plutonium is levitated on supports so that the outer parts of the pit acquire momentum and strike the plutonium hard. There was a nuclear test not in the late 40s, sandstone in the X-ray series, or is it X-ray in the sandstone series? Anyway, that established that. I guess it was 48, and immediately all of the pit designs were changed because it was much more efficient to make pits that way, save on material. But why is it so expensive? Yes.
And it has to be alloyed with, what are these, gallium?
Gallium, yes.
And 5 different states or whatever you call that.
Yeah. Very complex chemistry because of very large atom, electrons floating around, barely attached. And it's expensive because it's toxic. It's it's pyrophoric.
Meaning it bursts into flame in contact with air.
Yes, if,
Okay.
in small, not a big mess, but if it like a shaving,
Sure.
and or water, it forms a hydride, and which is even worse in some ways. It you can have inadvertent criticality by either by having too much of the material or by the introduction of a moderator like water that increases the cross section of the neutrons so that the effective critical mass is smaller. And so
Well,
there's
I mean,
many
beryllium is one of the shells you put on there, right?
often, yes,
Which
it
is
is.
what was his name, Slotnick or
Slotin.
Slotin dropped on and caused a prompt critical.
I think he dropped the whole half a pit, but I'm not sure.
Sure.
Yeah. And so in any case, it's very dangerous, and it has, and you can imagine the concatenation of the safety issues, the security issues. It takes a long time to train someone to work with this material, and the tolerances are very precise. And so you add it all up together, it's hard to do. And then you add to that this is Los Alamos, and you add to that this is the nuclear weapons complex. So just having it in a material accountability area, you and I, even if we had a temporary badge, if I had a temporary, I couldn't walk in there without a guard with me at all times. So if you have someone with certain, say, craft skill that you need very badly to go to the next stage in your equipment installation, that person has to have a guard with him. Then you're adding 2 people to the work population in PF4 and more people there, different types of people in the same small space. PF4 was originally designed to have about 100 people working there, and now there's about 1,000. Yeah, we got to move.
Oh, thank you. Just real quickly, how are we on schedule?
We're doing all right.
Oh, good. I mean, for the 10 White Rock pits, are we doing good that for 2024?
Oh, no, we're not doing good.
Oh, okay. War reserved.
It's not White Rock. It's War Reserve.
Thank you, guys. It looks like White Rock. Okay, so I'm new here. And so I noticed you said you were down for 3 years. So just very briefly for people who are brand new. So the safety has been increased. Is there anything, I don't know if you're going to talk about safety in this one later on, but if you could say 1 or 2 words about that.
Go ahead.
As long as you're allowed to.
Yeah, go ahead.
If you could.
If I could.
Can we reassure us on the safety?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Now, you know that we are the loyal opposition. We're not the lab. We do know something about safety, but not everything by any means. I used to be a safety inspector for the state, but not of this. And so I would say that LANL is trying to make everything safer. And I think in some ways it's succeeding. We get alarming stories sometimes from people who dissent and whistleblowers say they're not succeeding. So what's it? Yes, you're very welcome. Oh. Okay. Yes, thank you for coming. So at Rocky Flats, for example, if you were a radiological safety technician, or RCT, radio control technician, you had to shadow someone for 3 years before you're allowed to make any decisions. And you became very familiar with a particular building and what happens there and so forth. And in part, they could do that because people stayed in their jobs in the United States for a longer period of time. And now there's more mobility between jobs. And so Los Alamos has a lot of young people, young in experience, young in training, and they have to be brought along very quickly. So you might have someone who's only been there, 3 months. And this one woman who had been at RCT at Rocky Flats said, I was meeting RCTs at Los Alamos who didn't know what a criticality event was. And she freaked out. And she said, I don't want to work here. It's not safe. And so the impression I had, and I think most people have, is that Rocky Flats was a dangerous place and Los Alamos was safer. However, I think there are cases where that wasn't the case. And she provided a lot of other stories. But I know that the people who are in charge want to make it safe. And it's a matter of juggling a lot of things at the same time. There's legacy issues too. This building it's 50 years old, probably next year, and in operation about 48 years. So for example, there was recently a damper actuator in the ventilation system that didn't work and sent the wrong signal, causing the ventilation system, did it alarm? It didn't alarm. It didn't alarm. It should have alarmed and it didn't alarm. And the problem was an old damper actuator. And so it's a very complex infrastructure with a lot of stuff going on, a lot of people in it. And there have been quite a few safety mishaps. But there always will be in this line of work. And you don't know whether something's trivial or serious often. If it's repeated, and some things are obviously serious, but if some things are repeated again and again, then that's a real warning sign. Moving on. More comments, questions? Yes, Sam.
Thank you. A juxtaposition, I guess. You talked about war right off the bat, and we talk about safety of our workers here in Los Alamos and the citizens here. Is there a consideration for the citizens in Russia whom we have our weapons pointed towards, and potentially China, North Korea? Innocent people that really don't have any part of the game, I guess. And is there consideration within the people in Washington for that concern that I have? Anyway, could you speak to that?
Yeah, thank you, Sam. That's a wonderful question. And I would say the short answer is no. That what is of concern is what would the Russians or the Chinese or the North Koreans do to us? So that concern is there, but it's reflected through the potential actions of the adversary. As you know, as the head of Sandia used to say, the word deterrence, the terror in deterrence is terror. And it comes from terror. So that is the gist of what the nuclear weapons are supposed to supply, is terror, which is why some of us would like to get rid of them. But it was, I guess, Churchill at that speech in Missouri after the Cold War speech. He said, security will be the sturdy child of terror or something like that in the new atomic age. And I wish, Cuban Missile Crisis, the two leaders, JFK and Nikita Khrushchev, were acutely aware of this. And it was very conscious to them, especially Khrushchev, I would say, but also JFK, yes, sir. Yeah.
So that was my other question. What do we know about what the Russians are doing in this same line of work?
Yes. Another great question. They're doing a bunch. In pit production, the Russians never stopped like we did. So they had a different philosophy. We made pits that lasted a long time. They made pits that they had to remake. My understanding, which may be right or may not be, is that they had a corrosion problem. And when you machine a pit, there's two shells, you have to join them. And they had corrosion at the equator. And with the result that they had to remake them every 10 years or so. This had the benefit of maintaining the workforce, maintaining the skills, and kind of churning the arsenal. And they didn't want all these skills proliferating all over the world. And so they've kept at it in a way that we have not. And the Rocky Flats plant, I didn't say this, but it was shut down for cause. You know, y'all probably know that there were environmental and worker safety problems there that were so severe that the EPA and FBI raided the place, and it never could restart after that. And there were definitely terrible safety problems in Russia, but nobody shut them down. They kept going. And so so the question is, you know, whether we want to construe ourselves as being in a race or whether our, 1,750 or whatever it is deployed warheads and bombs, plus that same in reserve, plus that same amount in the dismantlement queue, they're still intact, plus thousands of extra pits, some of which can be reused under some conditions. So that's a lot of, a lot of mass destruction, and they're good for quite a long time. And there's a sort of a debate, and if you're some activist type people say, well, we know they'll all last 100 years, and NNSA says, no, we don't really know that, and we know they last long, but we're not sure, and so. So this puts the NNSA and the DoD in the position of wanting to have a pit factory. It takes a long time to get one, and so that's where they are. One more before we go on. Okay. Okay. So what are we actually doing, and how did we get here? This is where you get some messy stuff. This is an aerial photo of PF4 taken by Trish. This is the CMRR R-Lube. This one-sided pit here, it's dug into the side of this mesa here, is where the nuclear facility was going to be. This is material disposal area C that the Environment Department wants to dig up, and the laboratory would like to use as a construction laydown area and / parking lot. And that's Pajarito Canyon over there. Oh yeah, I could do this. Here's another view from the south. These are temporary structures in here. That's a warehouse. One of the things that I want to convey with this picture is it's very crowded. It's crowded in TA 55. And this is not a place where you can easily add a big new mission. There it is, looking straight down. This is the perimeter, what's it called? Perimeter PIDAS, called PIDADS now. Perimeter interception, detection, assessment, denial. There's a denial in a system. It's a fence. Cost $5,000 an inch last time. And this is PF4, the dark colored roof here, I guess. I'm not too sure about this other part over here. No, this is not, I've never been in PF4. I don't know whether this is a part of the nuclear facility or not. These are loading docks here. Oh yeah. Los Alamos is potentially very seismic. And since PF4 was built, the assessment of the seismicity of Los Alamos has changed dramatically. Chuck Kyler's was at the safety board, and then he went to NNSA, causing the safety board to joke when I asked, "Where's Chuck?" They said, "Chuck who?" The traitor. Anyway, he was a wonderful safety person. Anyway, the seismic stresses in this building have increased about 3-fold horizontally and 6-fold vertically since it was built. The assessment of what the accelerations will be. The fortunate part in this is that when it was built, there was an assessment that it needed to be built to withstand tornadoes. And the tornado resistance has helped it be more seismically resistant than it would otherwise be. This is a quote from a senior government official I cannot give the name of. He said, "We all know, Greg, what's going to happen with pit production at Los Alamos. It will go on until there's an accident. We can only hope not too many people will be hurt." And he's a serving official now, but I cannot say. Okay, this compares there are 2 sites in the pit production program, what we might call the program of record, the thing that's funded and authorized. So this column here represents the Savannah River site project. That stands for Savannah River Plutonium Processing Facility. And this are all sorts of projects at Los Alamos. These 11 things down here are all the functions that have to be in place to have a plutonium pit manufacturing capability. So you can see that there's 2 very different philosophies for how to acquire this capability. At Savannah River, they're almost starting from scratch. They have a building, but they've never made pits. So their capital project includes almost everything that you need to do to make pits. That makes it a very large capital project. Here at Los Alamos, the effort is split across all these projects so that there's a kind of hodgepodge of expenses. Not shown, the biggest category of all, which is the program expenses or operating expenses. Since we're spending so much time on Los Alamos, here's the Savannah River situation. They have this big building right here. They have this building, and they have a few others here, but this is the equivalent of PF4, only it's very large. PF4 has 60,000 approximately square feet of usable high hazard space. They'll have 400,000. It wasn't laid out to be a pit factory. It was laid out to be a factory for mixed oxide nuclear reactor fuel. So that means hundreds of openings have to be created in the concrete walls inside. And a lot of the work that was done to create the mixed oxide fuel factory has to be torn out. They have just this summer finished the tear out phase of the project. And they have people working 24/7 there as well. Here, I like this chart. It's a couple of years old, but because it shows the design and construction and startup people, this is staffing in thousands, 1, 2, 3, if you can't see it. So these are the construction people, and then they peak. They don't have years here, but we'll see that in a minute. And they go to 0, and they're gradually replaced by operations people. And when all is said and done, they will have a little less than 2,000 people working on pit production. At Los Alamos, the comparable figure is 4,100. So Los Alamos has said we need 4,105 people to work in this pit factory. And that has enormous effects on the cost of operations. This is a brand new slide from the director of the Savannah River SRNS National Security Site. And this shows the different, the craft workers as it tails off in 2030. 2031 here. So they're going to hire a lot of people, a lot of people. That's 5,000 there. So they expect in 2027 to be having 5,000 people building this. So they're going to have their own housing problems, but they're in a much more populated area. Lots of, they're close to Augusta, Georgia. The population density is much higher, and anyway, I don't think they're going to have any trouble, but it's still a lot of people. And so this is the new plan to upgrade PF4. This is another capital project. This is called TA55 Reinvestment Project Phase 3, and that is the fire alarm for PF4 because it doesn't meet code. It doesn't even meet commercial code right now. This is the conversion of the Arlo building into a low-level nuclear facility, transuranic waste facility, transuranic liquid waste facility. This is actually in Nevada, the device assembly facility, and some work will be done there. The Sigma building in TA3 will have to be replaced. And there is already one remote LANL campus, and there could be more because LANL's running out of space. These are some other of the capital projects that are necessary. Here's the Sigma replacement project. We think it's going to be $1 billion project. And we note that at some point, PF4 is going to, according to LANL, will be replaced or augmented. And some senior congressional staff tell me that there actually are no plans for that, but that is a question. That is a question which the Los Alamos community and the nation will have to look at. Are we going to replace PF4 or augment it in a major way to continue or to expand pit production? Replacing PF4 is approximately in itself a $20 billion project. It would cost about as much as the main building of the Savannah River plutonium processing facility. Now, how are we doing? The question, how are we doing on this 10 pits per year? Not great. We just made one pit. As a footnote, this less than 10 pits per year are funded out of operations, not out of any of the capital projects. They have a new strategy called 30 Diamond, and they're trying to get 30 pits in 1 year as fast as possible. And so maybe they'll be able to do that in 2028. That's what they hope. It's 2 years past the statutory deadline, but they hope they can do it by 2028. And apparently they call this key performance parameter 1. And then there is the next level is, key performance parameter 2. And that is when you get an average of 30 pits per year. So an average of 30 pits per year is KPP2. And that's supposed to happen in 2030 at the end. And then we have the full Monty here, 90% confidence of at least 30 pits per year with single shift production in a single year, and they expect to have that ready by. Yes, okay, coming to that. So So the average is going to be more than 30. So you hear 30, you read it in the paper, but it's more than 30. Let's see here. Okay, we got 11 minutes. So the shape of how to stop this may hopefully beginning to take shape in your minds. Hopefully. So LANL originally got the interim pit mission by making fantastic claims about what they could do. And so they said, oh, we already have 50 pit a year capacity. And if you just, with 354 million or 710 million in today's dollars, we could make 100 pits a year. And it was completely, false. So they said they could be producing by 2002. Here we are 22 years later. We just made the first pit. So now I hope you're beginning to see that there's problems here. Oh yeah, I can use this. Our cost today, 22 billion, okay, a factor of 36 times. So we've had cost inflation of a factor of 36 over what the DOE estimated in 1996. If you want to start from the 2017 estimate, although it's not quite apples to apples, nominal 30 pits to reliable 30 pits, factor of 7. So this led the White House under OMB people to say, you know what, it'd be cheaper to build a factory for pits in Albuquerque and then bring it up by railroad to Los Alamos. And I said, wait a minute. They don't have a railroad to there's no railroad in Los Alamos. And the OMB guys chuckled and they said, yeah, that'd be in there too. Build a railroad also. It'd still be cheaper. And so that's stealing a line from David Rager on the council. So it's vastly expensive, really, really, really expensive. And Los Alamos has blown through those estimates. So how do we get here? Okay, we got a couple more minutes. The NNSA did an analysis of alternatives, and they came up with what they thought was the best way to make pits. And but what they came up with was nothing like what we're doing today. It differed in major ways. So the NNSA in 2017 did not credence that reliable production would be possible at PF4. They did not credence that it could be permanent in PF4. They rejected the 2-site production of the full statutory amount of pits as just incredibly wasteful. And let's see. However, so the two options that they came up with after a year and a half of study was the strategy that I just showed you at Savannah River, which is the existing strategy. They also rejected the modules at TA55, or build a brand new building at Los Alamos. And they said, well, that's going to take longer and cost more than building the facility at Savannah River. So the official analysis of how to do all this rejected what was subsequently decided. Then there was an engineering assessment, which is a problematic document in some ways, because they cut the amount of space needed to make pits in half without any explanation. And they did examine what is now called the SRPPF, and they found it the least risky alternative, and it had the greatest opportunities for doing better on cost and schedule. They never analyzed the enduring 30 greater than 30 pit per year emission at LANL, and they never analyzed two-site production. But then in a short period of time, in a few weeks between April 20th and May 10th, the NNSA changed their mind, and the briefing they gave to Congress just ginned up out of thin air an entirely different idea, which is the present idea. Okay, and why did this happen? It happened because of senatorial pressure from the New Mexico delegation and from Hawks in the Senate on the Senate Armed Services Committee, primarily. Costs per pit. The long and the short of it is that these are in millions of dollars per pit. That's total expenditures by those dates at Los Alamos in our model. These are what the pits cost based on being able to make this many pits or that many pits. And if you just look at the forward costs, so forget the sunk costs, then you can, then you get numbers like that. And you can check the details later, and there might be on our website, there's a better explanation of this. And at SRS, the capital cost is very high, anywhere from 18 to 25 billion. But it's a brand new facility, so NNSA produced a life cycle cost, which we can use. And making assumptions, it's crude, but the average cost per pit is in between 10 and 20, basically, rather than being between, say, 70 and 100, 120. So it's much cheaper for the country, if you want to do that, to build pits at Savannah River, if you want to build pits. And because the facility will last longer and is less than half as expensive per year to operate. Okay. That's the second part. Questions, comments? Sorry, it was a lot. So basically, we got to the present situation by force, by trickery.
Well, I can project. So what's the goal? Because it's pretty simple to say. Is it like stop making pits?
What is our goal?
Hope Russia and China, the DPRK and Persian,
Right.
Iranian Persian Empire just play nice? Is it, we're cool with it and move it to some other community because
Right.
we're just trying to preserve the beauty of New Mexico and don't care if we waste South Carolina, Georgia, or even let's say West Virginia. What's the goal?
Okay, great.
Rephrase for the live stream.
Oh, rephrase for the live stream.
Yeah.
Okay, so the excellent question is, what is the goal? Is it just to move this somewhere else? Is it to hope that North Korea and Russia and China just are nice? So what is our goal in all this? And so the answer is that we don't want a nuclear war. We want better relations with Russia, China, and North Korea. And we believe that making pits at this time is not necessary for deploying every single nuclear weapon we have now and every single nuclear weapon save one, the W-93, that is being contemplated and actually is part of the program of record. We are still in that window of time when we're confident in the longevity of pits, their shelf life. We don't have to reuse pits from a bunker in Pantex. We have enough pits at the moment, and we see the augmentation of the stockpile with another kind of nuclear weapon right at this moment as being, aggressive. It's not necessary. There are more than 500 W-87 Zeros. They're modern, they're accurate, they have insensitive high explosive, and they're horribly destructive, 300 kilotons, approximately, as far as we know, the same as the others. And those would be more than enough, to put on the new Sentinel system. Los Alamos pits would add another set of warheads that could be added on to put multiple warheads on those missiles if so desired. We don't want that. So we want to block that. And we want to delay the acquisition of pits as a measure of good faith without causing risk to the United States that would lead toward arms control in the future and would save money and would also save environment, blah, blah. So we'd rather take that 63 billion and make it into 30 billion. And so basically you could sum all that up by saying we want to delay this, prudently delay it. We see the stars aligning for delay. We know at the beginning I said we were realistic. We tried to be realistic. There's not a single congressman or member of the military, senior member, or for that matter, a federal judge that would say, I'm going to unilaterally disarm the United States right now. That's just not going to happen. So what could happen is that we could at least go back to the policy we had at the beginning of the Trump administration under General Klotz, who was not a dove, to say we just need one new Rocky Flats. We don't need two. The two came about, we believe, through corrupt politics. As somewhat, how to describe him? Anyway, a candid person in the White House said to me, the reason Los Alamos has pit production and we're doing the W-87-1 is to keep Livermore, to give Livermore a big new program. Because NIF is becoming long in the tooth and they won't have a new warhead to design and we could lose, we'll have to have the budget would have to go down at Livermore and we might lose the, quote, peer review aspect of Livermore, whatever. And so it's all about Livermore, said he. And this is just the kind of log rolling corruption in the military industrial complex that we think puts the United States in excessive danger.
So do we have any thing to indicate that Rocky Flats had a program that was equal to or worse than this as far as contamination of the water supply? And I realize that Rocky Flats had to be invaded by people from I guess the military or the government because they were doing such a bad job. Are we in a situation where we might, here in Los Alamos, go through the same problem? And do we have enough water to do what we're talking about?
We're not in that bad of a situation at all. Those were kind of the bad old days, and the main danger now would be two workers and so-called co-located workers who'd be very nearby. The closest members of the public are in the Elk Ridge Trailer Park, much in the news lately. And but nothing is happening like happened at Rocky Flats, where garden hoses were put out the door to get rid of plutonium contaminated liquid wastes and put it in a pond called Feeding the Ducks. And all the stuff, there were a lot of bad practices there. And because of people are a lot more conscientious now, And the Los Alamos community wouldn't stand for it. And neither would anybody, I don't think.
Radioactive material found in Los Alamos, about 6 months ago?
Yes. So yes, there's a lot here and there. There's residual contamination around Los Alamos. Most of it is buried, but there's some in Acid Canyon. And yes, you could recreate there, but no, it would be unwise to breathe in the dust for any length of time. Or the last time I was there, you could see pieces of the concrete outfall that were still there, and I don't know why they were still there. Someone in this audience had a brother who cooled their beer in that outfall. Yeah. So yeah, there's Los Alamos will never be fully cleaned up, but if you look around our society, and the anti-nuclear community was going to hate me now, there's a lot of dangers lurking under our kitchen sinks. It's in our food, from our plastic packaging, from our garden and household chemicals, and a lot of crap that is more proximate to our cells than something that might be buried 3 feet deep around here. And so I think that, yeah, they're having a meeting about that, and I hope that it's difficult to get to the whole issue is overlain with a lot of symbolism, and yeah, that's all I can say about it.
So I have a question. You probably already answered it, but you're really piquing my interest, and it's so complicated of what's going on here. Could you tell me the Los Alamos Study Group, who funded that? Like, where, for the politics wise, are you able to say that?
You mean who funds us?
Yeah, the Los Alamos Study Group. Who
That's
funds
us.
you guys?
Yeah.
So is it nonprofit?
Yes.
Nonprofit. Okay.
Yes.
That's
But that you can know more. We are mostly funded by a large number of individuals. That's it.
all right,
and-
thank you.
Yeah.
So I live here, and I've lived here for 27 years, so I'm a newcomer. And I also am not a lab employee. I was library and county employee. But because I'm a resident, I'm very well aware of the fact that we are isolated. You cannot put more people in this town. Our grocery store can't supply food for the people that are already here. Housing is unbelievably tight and really overpriced and ridiculous. People like my age who would like to retire living in Los Alamos can't afford to be here. Where does the dumb idea of increasing the workload of Los Alamos National Lab come from?
Boy, what a great question. And Bex is going to later on say something about, provide some of the statistics behind that, but where does it come from? The laboratory itself wants more work. So that's one place. The New Mexico delegation is very active in wanting more work, more money at Los Alamos, Sandia, and the other facilities. They can't seem to, their mental model, I think, is like a swimming pool. The state is like a swimming pool. And if you put a little money in, it just dissipates over the whole swimming pool. And there's plenty of room for more. But that really isn't like that at all. There's pressure. So this comes back to the very first slide. Why is pit production important? Without pit production, you can't make new warheads. Without this treadmill of new warheads that match new delivery systems, you can't keep up. You can't project the image of a powerful superpower. So there is a group of people, we know some of them in Washington, who feel that it's of existential importance that the United States project power around the world. And Los Alamos making pits, it's the only place pits can be made until at least 2035. And that vacuum of no new pits, oh my God, emperor has no clothes. So admirals come in front of committees and say, North Korea has a pit factory, France has a pit factory, the UK has a pit factory, Russia has plenty of pit factory. We have none. This is beyond a crisis, they say. And as a result, they look around and they say, who can do this? Los Alamos can do it. Then there's another group of people who make us tear our hair out on a daily basis. So we know who those people are. That's kind of all normal. But there's a lot of progressives who say, well, we don't want Lindsey Graham to have all that money in South Carolina. We wanted to go to a democratic state. And Martin Heinrich's an environmentalist. And he's a really great guy. Tom Udall, wonderful man. And these are our friends. And we would like to have this in New Mexico. And then there are some who say, well, and we know Los Alamos is a lousy place to do this. Ha, ha, ha. And we know that it will be inherently limited because Los Alamos is so limited and klutzy. And it will have all these problems and all these accidents. So let's bring it all to Los Alamos because it will fail. Well, that is a strategy which has been articulated in nonprofit circles. We don't buy it. But so you have 100 progressive Democrats voted to make Los Alamos the only pit factory and increase the pit production here at Los Alamos in the House, about 100 in the House. And those are not the Hawks doing it. They have their, they're doing it. They say, yeah, 2 pit factories, one now and one later. But there's a group in the House led by Congressman Garamendi, whom, from Northern California. He's our friend, but he would like to make Los Alamos the only pit factory, and so there are other academics who want to do that too, and all of this creates what you just described. Amen. We are at this hinge in history now, at this point where if we continue to try to project a dominant power where it's not wanted, people will reject it. We don't have the power that we used to have where, people would do what we say, and all over the world, there's now a large group of people who say no. And the trouble with, to answer this gentleman's question about what are we trying to do, we want to change the attitudes of those who want the United States to be an empire. And Los Alamos pit production is it's a necessary part of being an empire. If you can't make an atomic bomb from scratch, what are you? If you're just coasting on your atomic bombs of the past.
So we've talked about this a little bit, but I'm always going back to the fact that I did the dirt work out there for Rulob and was looking at doing the dirt work for the CMR facility. And I would say, and I'm going to make enemies here, that it was almost an embarrassment coming from doing work for the state, for the county, and then going out and attempting to be really efficient, building the Rulov facility and the CMR, and a lot of constraints, obviously, when you're building a nuke facility. But I always thought that the United States, part of the deterrence assumption that if you're going to project power, you're going to project the fact that you can make pits. And here in Los Alamos, it seems that that's the intent, to demonstrate to our supposed adversaries that we can, go along with the best of them and spit out pits just like North Korea is right now. But we're failing right here in this town. And I guess if you could speak to that a little bit, but where's the breaking point financially? I know a counselor just left, but when you put these figures up, GRT tax in the county, all that means to the council and the people of Los Alamos is that we're going to get a whole bunch of money for capital improvement projects and across the board. It's not going to affect housing at all. I mean, it's not going to make the housing situation, it's going to make it worse. But I'll leave it at that, and if you could speak to the first question.
Sure. Boy, that's really terrific. And I don't know where the breaking point is. That's a $64,000 question. I suppose if we had money to invest, then we could invest it appropriately if we knew the answer. But there's things happening, and that takes us into our next little section here. So the Congress doesn't know what pits cost. They're busy. They run for office. They have to raise money. And there's all these filters. It's very frustrating, really. But they don't realize that the W-87-1 warhead is now going to cost more than $1 million, $100 million a copy. And if you include the pits are so far off books. They're not included. Since they're a must-have, the cost, they're not, added in. And so there's an accounting question here, that how do you define a cost? So the debt is now approaching $36 trillion. We have to print $1 million every 90 days to keep all this going. And now, for the first time, interest payments exceed the defense budget. The recent Treasury report from the last month of last fiscal year had a larger, I forget the number, maybe it's here. Nope. Larger, the Pentagon budget is smaller than the annual interest paid in fiscal 24. So the BRICS are now account for a much larger part of the world's economy than the G7. We have this problem of PF4 aging. We have the uniquely unsuitable geography and logistics. We have climate change. We have labor and supply chain issues all over the country. And we have pressing civilian needs. With a lot of the housing stock aging, with the rest of the infrastructure aging. I personally think China could pull the rug out at any time with in a number of ways, rare earths, various things they make that we need. And the Sentinel missile is in worse shape, not the missile itself, but the silo, the civil works part of the Sentinel project. So if there was a delay in pits, it's not like the rest of the Sentinel system is not going to be delayed. It is going to be delayed. And I think we're seeing a lot of social and political instabilities, and they could get worse. When is the breaking point? When does somebody stand up and say, my God, why are we building 2 pit factories? when just 7 years ago, no one ever thought of building 2 pit factories. Here is, I barely know who Jim Rickards is, but I gather he's some kind of investment guru. And it's a good quote, so I kept it. But these graphs come from the Treasury, OMB, and CBO. And some, it's here we are in 24. It's just now crossed over, but it's going to go higher. And I'm not blaming this on Biden-Harris particularly, but there were rosy projections about the future, and that have not been borne out. Here's the climate. This is from a LANL report that we can't get the rest of. We're trying. But this is the Climate Change Vulnerability Assessment and Resilience plan for Los Alamos. And the risk score is there, high. So this is LANL for its various types of assets. And these are the hazards: extreme heat, extreme precip, thunderstorms, flooding, wildfire. The officialdom expects problems here. Savannah River site just had the eye of Hurricane Helene, just as it was transitioning down to a tropical storm, passed right over the site. And they had a whole lot of trees blow down. Their systems worked okay. Their backup generators worked. They didn't lose ventilation in their nuclear facilities over there. But they had 100 cars trapped inside on their roads by falling trees. And it took them days to get access to their own facilities there. So climate change and big storms are happening. This is all a bunch of detail. I'm sorry. I'm not going to talk about it. Except for that, I guess I should say that NNSA recognizes that PF4 is a finite facility. This is, don't just look at this last line. Oh, shoot. That, no, come back. This is Bex's slide. If pit costs were included, the cost for this warhead would rise to about that, using the total pit cost. Or if we just use the portion of the pit cost that we haven't spent already, it would be about 4 times the current estimate of the warhead cost. And would the congressional committees really even want this warhead if they knew it cost that much? I'm not sure. And we struggle to get this information in front of people. And so we'll keep trying. And I know that we could do better. But if they knew what all this costs, some of them wouldn't want to do it. Now, let's see. We are actually a little bit ahead of time. That's good. I'm going to turn this over to Bex, who made these slides. Here's a slide thing. This is,
That's a laser pointer.
Oh, wait, before we go to this, yeah, sure, Q&A between. Good idea. Yes.
Thank you. Can you mentioned moxing at Savannah River. Can you tell us what MOX is, what Los Alamos' responsibility is, where is the stuff coming from, and where are they putting the waste?
Another good question. So there's more than, so MOX means mixed oxide, or mixed, it's sort of a shorthand for mixed oxide reactor fuel. And it mixed, the 2 oxides are uranium and plutonium. And this was a plan to dispose of surplus plutonium, of which there's a lot, several tens of tons. And the idea was to make this MOX fuel, feed it into power producing reactors and use that plutonium to make energy, and then the product, the spent fuel, would be so radioactive that it would be protected from theft, and then it would be disposed. So that was the plan. But there were problems, and it's not a very attractive fuel for operators of reactors. And so now we have shifted to something called dilute and dispose of this excess plutonium. And the first step in this, under the present plan, is to take whatever form the plutonium is in and convert it to an oxide. Most of the plutonium is in the form of a metal. Most of it is in pits, old pits. So old pits are coming to Los Alamos to be opened up with a can opener and dissolved in either hot hydrogen or nitric acid. And eventually they produce a plutonium oxide product. That product is shipped to Savannah River, where some of this is also going on, and it is diluted with secret sauce called stardust. And then it is in a proliferation resistant form, and then it is shipped back for disposal at WIP. So this is the dilute and dispose project. It proceeds at a snail's pace, but it's one of the half a dozen or 6 or 8 missions that share PF4 with pit production. And was that okay? Did I get the? Yeah. So we have a radical idea about that, which is that we think that the denaturing of pits, and the person who's an expert about this is LANL director Tom Mason, that pits can be permanently decommissioned, made unusable in a nuclear weapon, but without opening them. So you could, for example, crush a pit in a press, and it would be useless then in a nuclear weapon. And you could crush it inside a malleable metal envelope, like copper, and evacuated first with a little tube. And you could do this in a hood. You would not even need to leave Pantex. Then you could take this denatured pit, put it in a criticality resistant overpack, and take it to WIP and dispose it. And this, we believe, should be studied, and it is not, however, compliant with the WIP waste acceptance criteria. And so we have this complicated thing going on which we think creates a lot of hazard. And so we could be tripping over ourselves with that. The budget hawks, the green eye shade people, say maybe if we should just store it for like a really long time at Pantex and deal with it later. And so that is also partly what's going on. Yeah.
Thank you. So we're talking about a lot of money, and I thought I heard you say that the production of pits is not a discretionary part of spending of the federal government. Is that what you meant to say?
Partly. That there's a law. It is part of the discretionary budget, so it could be changed. The law could be changed. And changing it is, a worthwhile thing to try to do. And however, we've spent a lot of time in Washington, and if we don't, so there's a long lead time. Here's the rub. It takes, let's say, 15 or 20 years to build out a pit factory from scratch. And so if you want pits in 2035, you have to have started in 2020. And so if you think you might want pits in 2035, you have to have started and you have to keep working. So for a congressperson or a general or something like that, they say, well, we believe it's prudent to prepare to make pits even if we might not need them. If we stop, then if we stop more than about 2 weeks, all the people working on these projects are going to going to leave. And then you'll have to start all over. And so the reality is they won't stop. They won't stop altogether. So they won't stop preparing to make pits somewhere. And they might not make them here. That might be realistic. That's pretty idealistic. We say, look, why can't you wait 11 years? Can't you wait 11 years for pits and leave taper off here at Los Alamos? You don't have to, I don't know, you must have known Ed Grothus. Yeah. Ed would, say, you don't have to go at Mach 7, slow down. And that's what we could do. We could take an exit ramp from this big buildup here in Los Alamos and begin to rebuild our relationships with other countries. And we have 11 years between now and when Savannah River could make pits, and we should use those 11 years in trying to mend fences rather than trying to be more ferocious and fearsome and spiky. Anyway, yeah. Okay, Bex, go for it. Bex is going to talk about some impacts.
Yeah, so the lab needs people to work at this pit factory, and I think everyone's had an opportunity probably to read this slide, but there's been a massive increase in LANL employees. There's now 19,000, and just 2 years ago, and there's only 17,000. That was a 75% increase than like a decade ago. So it's a very rapid increase. And yeah, as noted, it's expensive to live in Los Alamos. There's almost nowhere to live, even if you did want to pay the rent or buy a house. And so 60% of employees are commuting, and it's causing a lot of traffic. On top of the traffic, there's not many places to park. It's not really clear to us where employees, even if there's, hybrid telework, there's staggered shifts, there's many employees that have Fridays off. It's not really clear where they're parking. And actually, Ted Waika, the Los Alamos manager of the NNSA, said they're using drones to survey parking violations at LANL. And they're finding a lot, and I'm hearing that they're drone ticketing employees. So, yeah. So 19,000 employees, and we know there's a plan to build 13,000 or have 13,574 parking spaces on the LANL campus, but we don't know how many there really are today. But we know there's at least 7,644, but somewhere between there. Here's the plan. And some of these include building transportation structures in like busy TAs, specifically along the Pajarito corridor, where PF4, the pit factory, will be This is the current situation. There's 2,399 parking spaces in the Pajarito corridor, and like Greg mentioned, 4,100 employees at PF4, or at least needed. So there's and not many places to build parking structures, but nonetheless, LANL is planning to build them. In TA 35 and 55, there's going to be a joint one. We don't know where or what it'll look like because that was redacted from the transportation report. But we do know that's the plan. And in the end, there should be 8,329 parking spaces. How that's going to work out, it's really unclear. And even if they do have those 13,574, if they had them today, which I doubt they do, there would still be, if everyone brought their car to work, or even, less than 5,000, there'd be thousands of employees without a parking spot, and who knows where they're parking, strange places, and getting drone ticketed. So hopefully, or they're hoping to have 10% of the employees work off site, and that still means around 17,000 could be driving their personal vehicle to work if they're coming in during their hybrid schedule. It just doesn't add up. 17,000 is not, people that's not 17,000 parking spaces. So it's still short. Ted Waika has mentioned this is a terror part of the day. There's a lot of accidents. There's a lot of wildlife casualties and bad environmental impact. There's a lot of accidents going into Diamond Drive. And a lot of this is, due to just the traffic. And we also know there's some unsafe roads, lack of lights, S-curves that are presenting dangerous conditions. So altogether, it's not a good situation. And then just like everyone's been saying, here's the data for it, like 100% to 130% increase in rent in 5 years, and 75% in a house increases. It's too much. And the rental vacancy is about 2%. And a landlord needs 5% to get each unit ready for the next renters. So it's hard to find a place. And yeah, it's a uphill battle. There's some convoluted solutions. Park and Rides in San Felipe at Black Mesa Casino is supposed to have a pilot program. We're not sure if that's happening or not, but it should have 1,000 to 1,500 spaces. There's van pooling, carpooling, and LANL wants employees to van pool and carpool to Park and Rides, get on a Park and Ride, take a Park and Ride to, some of them will go straight to Pajarito Corridor, and some of them will go to TA3 or other parts of LANL campus, and then you'll take an internal transit system to the TA you work in. But it's really unclear how all these employees are working at LANL, where they're parking right now. And the roads, there's really no data on the impact to the roads. We're trying to get that from the Department of Transportation, because it's going to cost to maintain tens of thousands of employees going to and from. Not just including people who work at LANL, but also interns, visitors, and 3B employees, and others. It's actually not, we don't have a clear breakdown of who those 19,000 employees are, if they're all badge holders or a mix. So, but yeah, that's it. Oh. Okay, so an audience member asked about an evacuation plan, and it's so this is actually a concern of employees based on a small sample of 2,300 about they're worried about not having their car if there's like an emergency and you need to pick up your kid from school. But LANL is trying to figure out if there's like a taxi, because LANL employees can't rent like a federal vehicle. If there were a fire, there's really the 502 and the truck route. There's few places to enter and leave LANL. So in the event of like a fire or a crash, there can be major delays in getting home, if not being like trapped in Los Alamos. So yeah, I'm not sure there's a good emergency plan. It doesn't look good.
So I'd like to speak to that a little bit because that was my previous occupation. But so during the Sierra Grande fire, of course, it was amazing. They got everybody off the hill through Rindia Canyon. Since the last fire has been closed off because it's tribal property, and I'm not sure where the county's at with that option to evacuate. But last month, a truck that was delivering to LANL got off course, went up the main hill road, came back down, lost his brakes, flipped down into Tavi, and they had traffic blocked. Traffic couldn't get up or go back down. And so they rerouted all the traffic up through the Jemez. The first tractor trailer that went up into the Jemez got hung up on the first S curve. And I live in the Jemez, and you couldn't get home, nor could you get off the hill, nor could you go down into Rindia Canyon. And so the whole premise of this was that they were going to build two bridges. Am I right? Two bridges across White Rock Canyon. One bridge. And that's not going to happen. But it's certainly a concern for every citizen is an evacuation plan, and they don't have one. So that's all I have.
More comments and questions? Oh, that works. Okay. Yes, Benton.
Yeah, I have a question about how much money is going to have to be spent to do the development and production of these pits, but I don't hear anything about how much is going to be spent on taking care of the problem that we face. We face this because of climate change. We have got to quit putting carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which means we got to quit using cars that demand fossil fuels. We've got to do that. You can't spend every penny you have on building these. We've got to have money available for taking care of climate change. I heard nothing about this.
Right.
And so what do we? I mean, basically, here's a suggestion, which shows my ignorance more than anything else. It seems to me that we need to have a get together with Russia and with other countries and quit trying to show hegemony is always the United States. And we need to, if we can do that, then we have a chance of being able to not spend this much money on this stuff, and we can take care of ourselves regarding climate change. And if we don't, we're just as cooked in the long run as being hit by some missiles with bombs. That's my comment.
Well, I agree. And people don't realize that, I mean, we don't have a very much democracy, and I think it's sort of discouraging for people. So they don't want to connect the dot between spending over half of our discretionary budget on the military and climate change. We can't afford to do both. And it only in the last few years, I heard this before, but it didn't hit me in as strongly as it has in the last decade. We don't have the depth of skills in the labor pool to do both. We just don't have enough electricians. We don't have enough iron workers. We don't have enough engineers and so forth to even barely maintain what we have, let alone build out what we need. And we here in northern New Mexico, the laboratory is hiring most of the loose, it's sort of like, I don't know, one of these games with the little steel balls that's, go into a little detent in the cardboard and you want to get them. Anyway, all the little steel balls roll toward Los Alamos because the pay is so high. So talent is being sucked to Los Alamos and out of other very important civilian activities.
I think there's a lot of work being done in the universities on climate change, and I think if they've realized that they won't be able to take care of climate change appropriately, we're going to have a terrible situation. So I think it's the same thing exists probably in Russia. They just don't talk about it, and it seems to me that we could have a conference, bring these leaders together, and say, we can't do both. Which one is the most beneficial to humanity? Well, climate change is, and we just have to convince ourselves, along with the Russians and whomever, that we have to do that. We can't spend all our money on these pits.
Well,
that's my
sure. What yeah, you're absolutely right, and it's going to take a long time to have those. We have to start trying to have those conversations. Right now, a conversation like that with Russians would hear they want to cut off our fossil fuel exports and destroy us as a country, which would be accurate. That is exactly what Tony Blinken and Jake Sullivan and company want to do and have been doing. And so that's what they would hear. They wouldn't hear climate. They'd hear they're trying to destroy us and break us apart as a country. And so we have to really work. And there's a role for citizens in this to do it directly. We did email the ambassador, who's since been recalled, the Russian ambassador, to come and speak right here in this room. And because we know people that know him, academics, but and it wouldn't have been. I mean, he's willing to have lunch with an academic in Washington, and we thought, oh gosh, that's so close, Wouldn't he want to talk to people in Los Alamos? It'd be like, no, he would not get permission. He could not get permission, presumably, but so we can't have these conversations. But we have to probe and keep trying. David. Yeah, go ahead, David.
Hey, Greg. So the third power line, and just for people's information, County Council has on the agenda the approval of the Climate Action Plan, which calls for climate neutrality in Los Alamos County in 2050, and I think phasing out all fossil fuels in 2070, the last one being natural gas. So that's full electrification, and the county cannot achieve its climate goals without that third power line. And I know there's been some movement on that. The Santa Fe National Forest had a finding of no significant issues. I know it's being challenged, but I guess it has to go through two more agencies before that happens. But I'd like to know what your thoughts are on.
Okay, they're complicated. Because it's complicated. First of all, oh my gosh. So LANL has more than doubled its own demand here. And it might be tripled, I'm not sure. But the problem is, the big problem is not the county and the residential and commercial uses of electricity, but the supercomputers and LANC. So the ambitions of the laboratory, to going back to the previous question, it's not enough to have yesterday's supercomputers. Yeah, we must keep up with the Joneses on the supercomputing world, even though Livermore has just installed an electrical system that will run 2 exascale computing systems simultaneously. But that's Livermore. That's not here. We have to have our own here. And so therefore, we have this gigantic electrical demand. And so we need another power line. But at the other end of the power line, where's that power being generated exactly? So is it going to be a nuclear power plant, or is it from wind turbines or something? So the power line that comes to Los Alamos carries power from something. Right now, as you know, what is it, about 30% from a lignite burning power plant in Wyoming. But we want to get rid of that. And the sun only shines in the daytime, and the wind blows sometimes, more on the plains. So Los Alamos needs very reliable power. So maybe they need a big battery, big batteries. Well, okay. So we have to have materials for batteries, and that has some impact, quite a bit of impact, maybe. I'm very skeptical of all plans that take a really long time. So I don't like these long, 2050, 2070, because I'm not sure the United States will be here. And I'm not sure any of us is going to, there's a lot of things that are going to happen. The Potsdam Institute says that the Earth will go into a new climate state long before then. So, so what do? Well, we must conserve, for one thing, and we have to change our demand and the timing of our demand, but that doesn't work for a long calculation. At a supercomputer, they need to run, I don't know how long they go now, a week, a month, whatever. So LANL bad, community good. Small reactor, yes. The county was signed up to that. UAMPS. Yeah. Yeah, it collapsed. Yeah, not enough people signed on. It's too big for that. But a mutual friend of many of us here, Cal Spencer, he's adamant that, well, DOE is in favor of small modular reactors, and he personally is. So let's put invest in this right here. If it's your baby, do it. And say it again. They aren't big enough for. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's no cooling water. Exactly. We'd have to use the water that comes from the pump and treat for from the chromium, and Jody got a kick out of that. But oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I'm not being snide, but if you look at how the cost went down for solar, such that if we were trying to convert to solar 20 years ago, it would have been absolutely impossible. So we can fault ourselves for not having changed, but there was no way to getting off fossil fuels 20 years ago. It would have been impossible. And even now, of course, if we turn off all CO2, we've got this peak curve, right? It'll be a long time before the CO2 goes down. I mean, a very long time, beyond probably our lifespans. So this is terrible, but we have to adjust to a hotter world. There's no way out of that. Terrible, I know, but there is no easy way out of that.
Yeah, no, there isn't.
And as far as negotiating environmental stuff with Russia, I don't think the five bad countries are in any mood to talk to anybody else right now, are they? So. That's not the point. That's not the point. That's not the point. That's not the point. By saying it's just the United States, so everybody else was innocent, it was just us, right? So now you're going to argue who started the Cold War, right? And here we go again, right? You know, it's never going to end. You know, who's responsible? It doesn't matter who's responsible. And obviously, enough for now.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no, if you have more, we love it. Okay. We'll get back to you and then here. Jump in.
Okay. I have a question. So, talking about that, like, you know, there's to no end and there's no end in sight. If there's steady growth rate and we don't foresee it stopping within exponential years, what are some concrete solutions to tackle what would be considered like these solutions that we have up here to fight this uphill battle up the hill?
Good question. The laboratory has had some, you know, changing mix of solutions. Sam brought up the bridge over the Rio Grande and new highways. It was 2 highways. And David Rager brought it up at council the other night. Why don't we just build a bridge? And I mean, and you have to, I admire the clear logic there, because it would shorten the route. And there's, like climate change, there's no perfect solution to this. There's not going to be, it's not going to be nice no matter what. Tom Mason, in a speech I heard in Washington, said, Los Alamos is at the end of the world's longest cul-de-sac. And they're struggling with it. People, you know, as Beck said, you get on a, let's say, drive to San Felipe. Let's say you're in Rio Rancho. Drive to San Felipe, get on a big bus. Take the bus to the transit center, get on then a little bus and go to your technical area, and then reverse the whole thing. That's a long bunch of commuting on buses. And it's not, the lab is very worried about employee retention. Lindy, who is here but hasn't said anything, gave a little talk about a couple months ago about the basic notion that the laboratory has broken through any reasonable scale of activity on this mesa. That it's just out of scale now. It's out of proportion. Sam previously said that the laboratory has used up all the margin in the infrastructure, in the road network. So anybody who wants to start a business or whatever, you can't put a traffic light and get a protected turn lane because the traffic's going to back up all the way down the hill. And so the result is that the laboratory gets what it wants, and but it's kind of gone past the social carrying capacity of the community and of, in a way, of the region. So there's these solutions, but they'll make it better, but it may not be a lot better if all those people are there. And I didn't say, but well, it's possible that there could be a push, there is a minority push to shut down the proposed pit factory at Savannah River. And should that happen, it will not be the general saying, oh yeah, we don't need very many pits after all. We'll just get by on 40% or 30% of the pits, and we'll just be in this old building that's going to be falling apart in 15 years. That's not going to be what they're going to say. They're going to say we need to double up at Los Alamos. And then all these problems are going to be twice as bad.
Another solution is to just not have a plutonium bomb factory, a very expensive, risky plutonium bomb factory when we could really be funding like food and healthcare and housing and things that people need. And then you don't have 19,000 people trying to figure out where to park and not get drone ticketed. And then
So I just want to speak real quick about what I read in, I think, The Economist. About 4 out of 5, maybe other people have heard this, vehicles sold in the United States now are huge trucks and SUVs because they're more likely to win in an accident. Now, if you look at the traffic coming from Espanola and Santa Fe, that's what you're seeing here, the manifestation of people scared because of all the wrecks that are happening coming up the hill. We're aware of them. Some of them aren't due to traffic, it's inattention. But nonetheless, people want big vehicles that gobble up gas and pollute the environment because they don't feel safe on the roads. And when you're talking about the county in these initiatives, they should be pushing back at NNSA for crowding these roads and making them unsafe before this whole thing happened. When I developed Entrada Business Park, we spent 2 years with District 5 and Santa Fe just getting permission to get out on to 502. And LANL did all this expansion with no pushback from the county, saying exactly what you said. Any new business that starts, it could be a tech transfer, startup, restaurant, is going to have a hard time convincing the county that they need a light to get out of their prospective business. So I just wanted to throw that out.
I wanted to say one other impact that's not easy. I didn't fully see this, and it was brought up by one of our board members. Although we've talked about the direct impact is easy to understand, but the indirect is less, of working 24/7, of having people on graveyard shift. So it's dangerous to work on graveyard shift. And there's more accidents and people are not at their best. Sometimes the support people that you need, whether you're working at Pantex or Los Alamos, are not there to help you. The certified forklift operator or the warehouse individual for the part that you need. So it's not very efficient and it can be pretty dangerous. And it, of course, messes up your own health. It's a cause of shortened longevity, but also diabetes, type 2, and cancer. But beyond that, it's an impact on the community. It affects families. It affects drug and alcohol abuse. It affects fire and police services. It affects the fabric of the whole community when you've got this cycle of working around the clock and people impaired and needing, it's just not good for you and it's not good for families. And I've never seen an analysis of this in any NNSA EIS or anything like that. But if you've been around a family that has got a person who has those kind of hours, you see the impact. Maybe just one or two more things and then we should go.
Thanks. The Sierra Club in our evaluation of the EIS recommended something, and that was, and we have proposed this to Tom Mason and everybody else on the other side, and that is, if we really are going to have a 24/7 pit production facility, what we need is just sleeping dorms. Let's go back to the past, have dorms at the facility, and so that the people who are working the 312s or however many they're working, they'll just stay in the dorm, and then they'll be transported. The reaction we got was the government isn't responsible for creating that kind of housing, and there's no space for it. But I think if there are a lot of people who really put pressure on the lab, if the pit production ever happens, the county also needs to step up. And then we could have also the transport that they used to have, similar to what they had from Las Vegas to the test site. So I think it's doable if we ever get that done, but we just have to be assertive. We have to, as you were saying, that's we have reached our capacity. Or maybe it was Bex who was saying that. We've reached our capacity. They need to step up. If they're going to do this, it's their responsibility.
A gentleman who is probably the single most knowledgeable person in government outside NNSA about pit production said to me, you know, if NNSA is really serious about pit production at Los Alamos, they'd build dorms. And that he said the same thing. And so, but where? Yeah. TA-72 or I don't know, whatever it is over there by White Rock. But, you know, they're not going to do that, like Jody said. But there's a sort of a lack of seriousness. There's a kind of a push because isn't any resistance.
Well, I'm thinking about the dorms. I really like that idea because I was sitting here thinking there's something so wrong with the fact that people love to romanticize the Manhattan Project, and it seems so sexy the way that they were up here and they had these funky buildings and it was earthy and everybody got together and partied and it sounds really cool. So if you had people and said, you can go and you can spend more time out in nature, like put them out in tents and put them in dorms and let them all of a sudden become nicer people and be less tech oriented and start living a real life and loving what they do, because you can't have your heart in it for making nuclear weapons. That's goofy. Right?
All right. I think that we should now go, I think. Yay. Thank you all very much.
But before you go, if you want to, please sign up so you can hear about the next events and express your opposition to plutonium bomb production.